Samiha, so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
I watched the Netflix movie To the Bone,
Mhm.
and the character Ellen was a young white female.
Mhm.
And I thought, this isn't what eating disorders always look like. What are your thoughts on the movie, Samiha?
What I thought about the movie was, first of all, I was glad that they had a movie about eating
Someone's
disorders on
talking
such
about
a
it. Mhm.
yeah, someone's talking about it. It's among discourse. It's on Netflix. People are going to learn about eating disorders. There were some things, and it's not just me voicing this concern about the main character. Like, she's white, she's so thin. I think she was of a higher middle class family too. And one thing about eating disorders is that's not the only type of person it affects. It affects people, not just female, men as well, individuals of higher body fat percentage, just normal people, like normal body weight. It is an invisible illness, so it is very ingrained in your mind. So it's hard to kind of see this is what it looks like, someone who has an eating disorder.
Mhm.
You can't really judge someone based on how they look and say, like, I think they have an eating disorder. It's very complex.
And I
it is.
understand there's a whole spectrum of eating disorders,
Yes.
many different types.
Yeah.
And it can manifest itself in so many different ways. Do you
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit about that?
So I think the main few types of eating disorders people know about is anorexia nervosa. That's when you severely restrict yourself of food and you get to a very scary body weight percentage. It's one of the highest mortality rates across all mental health disorders. And then there's bulimia nervosa, where you go through a cycle of eating a lot, and then you're purging it out. You're either vomiting or you're recompensating by exercising. There are also a lot of different eating disorders people don't know about. There's pica, there's avoidant restrictive eating disorder, there's exercise, excessive exercise.
Mhm.
People who are going to the gym like 3 to 4 times a day, and it becomes an obsession, it becomes something they identify with. There's other specified eating disorders. Research is ongoing on this topic. They're finding new research on this every day. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was like more eating disorders, especially in the Western community and what we see, how much attention is placed on what we look like. I wouldn't be surprised if we find out like a few more eating disorders in the next few years.
Samiha, how can someone tell if they have an eating disorder, or how can you identify that someone has one? Is it obvious by looking at them? I mean, I know you're saying that it could be somebody who's not skinny who has
Yeah.
an eating disorder, and in our society, it's very common for people to say things like, I hate myself, I'm really fat, or
I feel
I feel really guilty
guilty.
about
Yeah.
eating this, that sort of stuff. So it's really common. So at
Yeah.
what level does it become an eating disorder?
That's a good question. I think it's hard to answer that question, especially if you're kind of just, as you said, you're going to a restaurant with your friends and you're seeing someone, oh, I'm on this diet, or I can't have that, or I felt really bad about having this meal. I think thoughts like this are normal sometimes because it can be a side effect of the society we live in,
Mhm.
diets and fad cultures. I think the point where it gets dangerous is when it's at an unhealthy rate. It's not normal. It's affecting your day-to-day functioning. You're seeing someone you care about suddenly avoid meal times or have food rules, or they're as a result of the practices they're portraying, their body is changing. They're becoming very avoidant. There are so many, there's emotional, there's behavioral, there's physical things that you can see in a person who has an eating disorder. I think the main thing, how you would know, is they need to diagnose themselves. They need to go to a professional and assess themselves to see if they have an eating disorder. You can't, as a person, self-diagnose someone with an eating disorder.
The interesting thing is we're talking about how could you tell if you have an eating disorder, but somebody who actually has an eating disorder often has difficulty accepting that they have one, right?
Yes.
So it's the opposite for them. So they might not want to go to a doctor.
It's a very interesting illness because individuals in disorder are they can get very secretive, they can get very manipulative, because their eating disorder is not just an illness, it serves them in very harmful ways. It becomes their comfort, it becomes their shelter. It becomes a very harmful coping skill in their world that they did not have that much control over. Controlling what they eat is their means of controlling their world. So they're going to do what they can to protect their eating disorder. It becomes their voice in a way.
Samiha, you yourself have an eating disorder. Can you
I've had it.
You've had
Yes.
an eating disorder. So it seems like somebody can recover completely from it, is what you're saying.
Yes, you can recover completely from it. I would say at the same time, it's an ongoing process. As someone who's had an eating disorder, I still have, like, even right now, like I could feel my heart. It's still something that you have to choose. You have to choose recovery every day.
Mhm.
You have to choose not to participate in symptoms. You have to choose not to make that the focus point. Um, Alhamdulillah, as a Muslim, I think being a Muslim and connecting to Allah has helped me tremendously. It has shown me that, like, Allah is there for me and I can choose other ways to cope, because that was the main thing for me. It wasn't mainly about food or weight. It was about choosing a coping method that worked for me when I didn't have that toolkit.
Mhm.
Um,
So if I'm asked, what is your coping method?
for me, I did seek professional help, and I really recommend that. I resisted, but I think in the end, and I think this is for a lot of people too, they have to admit they have a problem.
Mhm.
You can't force someone to seek therapy. They're just going to sit there and look blankly at people, and they're going to go home and cling to that eating disorder, that illness. You have to admit you have a problem. You have to be open to seeking help. You have to be patient, consistent with the therapy. I did group therapy, so there was art therapy in there. There was DBT, cognitive CBT groups. It was very intensive, but I think it's what gave me the push I needed. And different people need different kind of help, because it is someone can have an eating disorder and it can last a few months and they can completely recover. Someone can have it and it lasts them 20, 30 years of their life.
Mhm. What was it like to be a Muslim and having an eating disorder? When you went into spaces, did you feel different? Like, how did your Muslimness affect you?
That's a good question. That's actually the reason I started the page on Instagram, Muslims with Eating Disorders. When I was in group therapy, I remember looking across the room and thinking, they would ask us questions about, how was your evening last night? What helped you cope? And for me, it was like connecting in prayer and talking to Allah about it. And He gave me that spiritual connection. It was hard to voice that. It wasn't so hard. I just felt like the black sheep saying, oh yeah, it was, sitting on a prayer mat and talking to God. Because when I looked across the room, it was, mostly it was white women, younger white women. And I recognized that there was a gap in Muslims seeking help, and also Muslims with eating disorder. Since I've made the page, I've had so many people reach out to me saying, like, I know someone, they're Muslim and they have an eating disorder. I think your page is so helpful. I've had people with eating disorders reach out to me. So I think what's so important in this space is that you're not a bad Muslim if you have a mental illness. It's just the way that God is choosing to test you, and it's your journey. And eating disorders don't discriminate. They're going to impact you regardless of if you're wearing a hijab, if you say you're a Muslim or not. It affects everyone.
How did your parents, your social circles respond to your eating disorder? Was there shame, stigma attached to it?
So yes, definitely, because first of all, being a Muslim to begin with and speaking about mental illness, it's not easy. Secondly, I'm South Asian, so it's not that common. You can imagine talking to your parents about having an eating disorder, having a mental illness. It's a difficult conversation. You want the best for your child. Sometimes you don't understand why can't they just eat? Can't they just not do what they're doing? Like, just eat. I remember my dad telling me, like, why just eat? Like, what's wrong? It was hard, and I understand it's hard to understand, but it's very integrated in your thoughts, and it gets manipulative. The ED voice is what I term it. Alhamdulillah, I'm so blessed to, like, be a Canadian, and the resources I got, even when I seek therapy, like, it was something that was very accessible. It was something, and there's so many resources online that someone can access, but I really do encourage people to seek professional help and not self-diagnose or get all the help they can through online. You do need a good support circle, but I think the first thing is just to self-advocate and acknowledge the illness that you have.
So, if somebody has an eating disorder, how can their parents, their loved ones, their friends support them?
I think it really there's a lot of steps to this. So I think one thing is learn a lot about eating disorders, do your research. Don't just assume something. Be very caring and empathetic about it. I wouldn't say you're noticing something in a loved one and you're just in the dinner table telling them. Maybe seek a private space, using I statements, saying, I'm noticing this is what's happening, observable practices that you're noticing in your loved ones. Like, I'm noticing you're going to the bathroom after having dinner. I'm just concerned, like, are you okay? I'm hearing sounds. Like, and the thing with people with eating disorders, they can get very defensive about their illness because it's something that serves them in a very manipulative way, but it serves them nonetheless. So sometimes when someone comes to you to talk about it, they can get very just, I'm going to shut you off right now. So I think what's important is you need to, A, be empathetic, 2, learn about eating disorder as much as you can, and 3, let them know that you're there to help them every step of the way. I rarely think that people can get through this alone. Like, it's not shameful to ask for help. So say, like, maybe I can go to the first session of therapy with you, or let's research some resources together. Let them know that help is needed, but they need to do it. They need to acknowledge that and take the first step. You can't really do it for them in a sense.
Samiha, I'm really impressed with the work that you're doing. You have an Instagram page, Muslims with Eating Disorders. And, I hope you can continue that. I follow it and I'm excited about it. And it was really brave of you also to share your story. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this video, click like and subscribe. And please donate to support our work at QuranSpeaks.com.